Beans. Well, let's get rolling then. Well, did you want to kick it off?
Yeah, so I see some new people here today. Usually, how these work is we introduce a topic on Tuesday and it gets voted on. This week, we decided to go with a topic because it's been sort of a topic of discussion in the community for a little bit now, and that's around fees. So, with that, we'll do some intros from the team to kind of kick off the discussion, but really meant to be open forum and welcome anybody to join the chat, whether it be on voice or if you're more comfortable in the chat window. We can answer some questions or entertain thoughts there as well. But yeah, I'll send it back to you, Chris.
Cool. Yeah, I'll just kick it off. And, in general, there's been a lot of conversation amongst the community around fees, specifically around vault fees. Some folks feeling, that there was some overpromise, under-delivered type activities on the WBTC vault. And because of the 0.5 withdrawal fee there, it makes it a little difficult for them to decide what to do and stay or go. And then with interest-bearing Bitcoin recently launching, there's been some feedback around the fees specific to that, which are 0.5% mint and 0.5% withdrawal. We decided, hey, let's really try and push everyone to get involved, right? Like the last thing we want to do is sit behind closed doors as a team and try and make decisions. Like in the end of the day, this is an open protocol, an open business, an organization, and the people that hold the token and in turn use their app and pay the fees are the ones that should be making all the decisions. Sometimes, it's only been 6 months, but, hold hands a little bit and get there. But, that's kind of our intention here is we want to try and be as open as possible. We want to try and have all these tough conversations, these challenging conversations together as a community, figure this all out so that everyone has a voice, everyone feels like they're involved, there's a high level of inclusiveness, and the app that we all use, myself included as a user, I'm happy with the fees that I'm paying, right? And I think the dichotomy to that is, imagine going to like Robinhood or like your bank and being like, hey dude, like your fees are shit and I want to change them to this. And they're like, okay, F you, get the hell out of the office, right? Like, or get off the phone. Like there's really no flexibility and freedom there. So it really highlights, that we actually have a voice as a community member. So that's what kicked it all off. The thing with fees though is it's a much greater conversation, right? There needs to be a lot of, like, I think there was some feedback from a community member yesterday in the interest-bearing Bitcoin fees Discord channel, which it was like, these are some good recommendations, but like we need data to back it up. And, I agree completely. And that's one of the reasons why the intention for anyone that's not familiar, yesterday night, maybe about 12 hours ago or 18 hours ago, we sent a message in the Discord saying, we want to get everybody involved. The bigger conversations tackling fees as a whole, that's going to take some time. That's going to take some deep analysis and producing some data and feeling comfortable with the change. That's going to be a deeper governance conversation. But in the short term, we think there's a kind of a quicker fix, which is this: let's address interest-bearing Bitcoin fees for minting and redeeming, and let's address the fees of the interest-bearing Bitcoin SLP. And that would be a great start as a community to make some change if that's how it shakes out. And we can feel relatively confident in that change and just, see how it goes, and then see if there's more interest-bearing Bitcoin that's being minted and redeemed, if there's more people that want to use the vault products because of the liquidity that you get with interest-bearing Bitcoin and the utility, and then have data and activity and actions inform, future decisions for the community. So as it stands right now, we are going to have a couple of days of conversation in the Discord, in the interest-bearing Bitcoin channel, the interest-bearing Bitcoin fees channel. From there, based on that feedback, the council is going to place a vote on what they think should happen. There's 7 council members, and it needs a majority vote to pass. And if there were to be a change to the fees across interest-bearing Bitcoin and that vault, then the development team will go forward and implement those fees as early as next week. So that was kind of what happened. That's kind of the process that we're going to follow. And then, ideally today we can talk openly about fees and things along those lines. So, our perspective has been, we do think the fees are cumbersome, and it makes it difficult when you're looking at kind of like stacking activities. What I mean by that is, we're going to be turning on interest-bearing Bitcoin on the bridge very soon. So now you have native Bitcoin and you pay a bridge fee and you deposit in a vault and there's a withdrawal fee there and a performance fee. Then there's a mint fee. Then when you want to come back, there's a redeem fee, and you find like there's a lot of fees there, and it just doesn't make it conducive to, hey, I want to put my Bitcoin to work and earn 7, 8, 9%. Now, if the interest rates are 5,000% and 300%, sure, right? Which in some instances happens, right? That's just kind of part of the state of DeFi right now. But we're trying to think about the bigger picture, right? And bringing on people that maybe are not as DeFi centric into wanting to put their Bitcoin to work. So that's how we're thinking about it. And we thought a potential good kind of benchmark for that is users can go to SushiSwap. They can swap from Bitcoin or WBTC to interest-bearing Bitcoin and pay a 3% fee. That has obviously slippage and price deviation. Then if they want to go back, they would pay another 0.3 and face the same price deviation and price slippage. That's 0.6 total. If we can mimic that fee in using the Badger app, but remove price deviation and slippage, since it's just minting activity and redeeming, then it would attract users to use Badger over some of the alternatives on exchanges. Badger, the protocol, would capture those fees, but more importantly, it would make the user experience using not only interest-bearing Bitcoin, but the bridge and the vaults a much more seamless and comfortable experience. So with that, I'll shut up and say anybody else either on the team in the community that wants to provide insight around their experience, where they think things should go, what they feel about kind of the fee structure that we're proposing, but just in general, like I'd love to have an open conversation here.
Yeah, I'll just, I guess, chime in a little bit. I think to all the points that you made, some little context around, like we haven't had like a universal strategy towards fees for our vaults and our products really to this point. This has been kind of like using whatever the standard is with the industry, finger in the wind, like, okay, let's go with this. Obviously, everyone who's a Badger holder benefits from the growth of the treasury we do through the fees, and through the kind of upcoming token economics proposals that'll become more of a direct component of it. So we obviously want to like optimize for receiving fees, but we want to make sure that the products are useful. So that's kind of the balance that we're trying to strike. And like I think we just hinted at there is great with looking at what are the alternatives for getting into this thing. Because APYs are going to go up and down and change over time. We can't really use that as too much of an input for how we're going to do fees. But I think we can figure out where we take our fees and then kind of look at what are the alternatives and what really makes sense to get kind of a start moving towards more of a general overall structure for how we approach this. So as we launch more products, more vaults, it's not, hey, let's put something in place and then see if everyone gets mad, or maybe we don't. Maybe we start just not getting as much revenue as we should for a product, but having something more thoughtful. And I think this is a great start. So yeah, that's all I wanted to kind of toss in there and leave it open if anyone wants to throw questions in the chat box or chime in. Go for it.
I mean, if nobody in the community is going to chime in, maybe I'll just throw a little more context out and see if it sparks anyone to chime anything in. So, like, I see like a lot of you guys from the community, like I've been talking with on Discord, and I think like one of the things that happened to a lot of people and like one of maybe the miscommunications that we had is we kind of released this BYV WBTC thing, and then right on the back of it we released IBBTC, right? And in the team and kind of in our economic minds, it was like, well, we should move most of the Badger emissions to the IBBTC sushi pool, right? So that everybody will move there and there's good emissions there and everybody can get it and it'll be nice, right? I think what ended up happening is that a lot of like bigger holders had like taken all of their available Bitcoin and stuck it in this BYV WBTC set, right? Which then left them in a situation where we're pulling the yields away from the set that isn't returning that well anymore. And the cost to enter something else is prohibitive. And then I think like, so depending on how much Bitcoin one has, like that problem could just be like, man, the minting cost is high and then I've got to swap and then I've got to go in. Or if you've got like a lot of Bitcoin, right, then there can also be some issues with like slippage and like, okay, I mint all of my BYVB WBTC into like IBBTC, but now I can't actually sell enough of it. So now I'm actually getting like an even lower APY and still not getting the Badger emission. So I part of what I think we're working to slowly try to solve is that overarching problem. And I guess one of the questions I have is, does this move of reducing the minting fees down to like 0.2% or 0.2%, the redeem fees to 0.1%, making it quicker and easier to get in and out of the sushi set, right? Like our hope is that like the smaller, bigger players will put more liquidity in there, which will then give the bigger players the ability to like swap their Bitcoin outright, and we're going to unlock that. But is there anybody here that feels still like locked in that situation and is like, is this something that you think is going to let you move, or does it still leave you in some situation of feeling stuck?
I'd say that I was one of those people, but I did move. But I certainly saw a lot of other comments from people in the year who didn't want to make that move. I think that lowering the fees on IBBTC is really good. I especially like it, with composability, such a big part of the story of IBBTC, knowing that moving to other options as they become available, like over the summer and beyond, is really appealing. But for people in the Yearn vault, it seemed like exiting that vault and the fees to exit that vault were as big a part of the problem as anything, which I don't think was specifically addressed in this sort of fee update.
Well, I mean, it is addressed in the sense that you can now mint for 0.2% and then and then sell for 0.3%, which is basically the same cost to exit that there was before. So yeah, maybe I guess what it allows you to do is mint, sell half or add some Bitcoin and then get back to making those high yields. But yeah, that's kind of, I do think we need to make sure that we're dealing with that if there are still people in that situation. Anybody else?
And Ben, to that point, like I was talking to the Yearn team this morning as well, and there's an ongoing conversation around reducing the management fee by 50%, which would help quite a bit on the underlying costs. And then, their recommendation as well is, we should take a look at the withdrawal fee associated with that vault, which I think is part of the, the greater conversation for vault fees.
And there's like a mathematical element to it. Like when I add up the numbers, what do they look like? But I think there's also just sort of like an emotional element to, to your point earlier, like depositing into the Yearn vault, it seemed like it was right on the heels of that IBBTC was sort of like released out into the world. So there's this pressure in this like really focused amount of time to either sort of give up on directly being deposited in the Yearn vault and move, and the costs associated with that I think just sort of felt kind of weird and wrong to some people. So I think whatever the mathematical realities of the fees are, I think that's one element, but I think some of it is just sort of like an emotional kind of good faith type move to sort of incentivize people emotionally to not feel bad about paying fees to get out of the Yearn vault that was sort of such a promoted product and then sort of like superseded by IBBTC so quickly.
And under-delivered from a yield perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think when you add that on top, if that hadn't been the case and the yields were through the roof, I don't think any of those conversations would have happened anyways, because everyone would have been so stoked.
Along those lines, we were just on a call with a large investor that not only looks at the math, but they openly said along the same lines, if you're giving me solid returns, I'm happy to pay you for that performance. But if I want to do something else, I don't want to be handicapped. So it's interesting to see that psychology applies not only to, me or you or any retail investor, but it also applies to really large investors on how they think about performance and being happy to pay a little bit from the profits they make.
Yeah, I think to put it in perspective, that was and then they have like 50 million inside of Badger.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was the sentiment. It was like, listen, you're creating profit. So that's, and I think for everybody, like there was some comments in the interest-bearing Bitcoin fee channel last night, which was along the lines of like, we should have no fees. It's all good. No fees, just performance. And in reality, I would be enthusiastic about that because it's a clear reason why people would want to put their capital to work. But if you look at Yearn in year one, in the first 6 months, you look at Badger in his first 6 months, 85% plus of all of our all of the revenue has come from withdrawal fees, right? The reason why for Yearn back then and for us now is because our underlying APY is not that high, right? Call it what it is. It's primarily Badger rewards in many instances. Why? Well, there needs to be better yield strategies. And two, there needs to be better yield strategies available, which there isn't that many for Bitcoin versus stable coins and things along those lines. So that's the other kind of push and pull here. It's like, we want to address, ZK, to your point, kind of the emotional feeling and kind of what's happened in the last month. We want to spend the time to evaluate the potential fee model that could make the most sense moving forward, rather than just saying, this is what it's been like for 6 months. This is industry standard. Let's roll with it. And more importantly, we need to develop more underlying yield strategies that generate high organic and sustainable APY. That was our hope, I hate to say, with the Yearn Vault and the Yearn partnership. Unfortunately, the strategies that were running in the guarded state and prior to that, that got us very excited, they lost some steam, and then the market hit the shitter, and the overarching yields are really not where we all wanted them to be. With that being said, between them and us, in my opinion, there is no better teams or developers that can generate in a secure way and a security first way the best yields on Bitcoin outside of us. And both groups are working actively. So it's one thing to look at that vault now and we need to address something. But if you were to look at it over the year and what the average underlying APY is, assuming again the market doesn't go into the shitter even further, and more opportunities for generating interest on Bitcoin and things along those lines come to the market, there's the average return on that vault I assume is going to be much higher than what it looks like today. And I think over time that will help settle a lot of users, especially some of the longer term users. But we should address, the immediate need right now. So I want to double take on Tritium's question. Let's assume the fees are changed. Would that, I know SG, you said no with the amount that you have, it probably wouldn't. Would changing the fees to 0.2 mint, 0.1 redeem, and then the SOP vault being 0.2, would that drive anyone in this room here to move from a certain vault position into interest-bearing Bitcoin? Yes or no? No one?
Let me just ask another question, because it's very often when we reach out to the community and we talk about fees, right? The loudest voice is fees are bad and they should go away. In particular,
I thought you were going to say, Ben, the loudest voice was you.
Well, yeah, maybe that's in our internal Discord, right? Like I'm an echo chamber man, but the loudest voice is like, fees are bad, they should go away entirely, right? The slightly more reasonable voice says, entry and exit fees provide like a blockage to mobility, right? And make an inefficient market. And so I'm okay with the performance fees, but not the entry and exit, right? And then like, it seems like there might be some people that kind of say like, I understand these fees, but like, they've got to make sense. So, like, are there people in this room that like actually do understand why there's deposit and withdraw fees and do understand like why this structure exists and maybe have some like input on the details of it other than just kind of like, I don't like fees and they should go away?
Hashera, what do you think?
You might be at work in another meeting or something.
What about Crypto Degen or Daniel?
There, we've got some answers. So like SG here says that the amount deposit fees are already paid. I don't think there are deposit fees unless you're into IBBTC, but frictionless 0% transfer between set vaults would be optimal. Will keep us in the ecosystem, then establish lower withdraw fees based on performance, not principal. So just one thing to point out is that with this change, right, you could mint something into IBBTC and then redeem something else back out, right? So it does reduce the cost to like switch between sets from 0.5% to 0.3%. But that's not zero, right? And then I guess SG, like this idea of like, yeah, like withdraw fees based on performance, not principal. Like I kind of agree, right? And I don't know how to do that right. But like in the situation where there's a vault and everybody's in it and there's like a lot of Bitcoin in it and it stops performing, right? It's also in our best interest for like everybody to like pull out of that vault and move into higher earning vaults and put that into Bitcoin, right? And so, yeah, like I mean, if we could figure out a model to make that work, that would be really cool. Does anybody have like thoughts on some sort of like performance-based withdrawal fees?
The only thing I have to add is that, with the frictionless swaps between, different sets, that's an economic, or not an economic, that's a potential vector of attack. We saw that with Pickle a while ago, where somebody had done that evil jar attack that, drained some liquidity from their TVL. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's definitely a potential, but it's something that would need to be, really vetted before anything's actually done.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree that like more than half of the economic attacks that we've seen, like, are prevented by a little fee, right? Because then they're not profitable. So when I hear people say drop fees, like what it registers in my mind is like, reduce them as low as possible to still be secure, right? And I think everybody in the community, like, once we make it clear that like, hey, like this is like a 0.05% fee, or like a very low fee in order to like maintain economic security and the security of the protocol, I don't think anybody will have a problem with that. And so I guess when I see zero, I think like as close to zero as possible. But I don't think for anybody, like, really, like, it is good we have some fees, some withdrawal fees, and like there is some cost to come in and out of our sets.
Anything else anybody would like to add as it relates to that? I obviously support that suggestion from Tritium. We got to be looking at two sides to the coin. We got to be looking at, first and foremost, in my opinion, security and protecting those funds, and secondly, the experience from a fee perspective.
I mean, the point about staying in the ecosystem, I think, is really important. There's a difference between withdrawing from the Yearn vault to then, go all the way back to WBTC or BTC or move your money elsewhere. That's a really different thing than withdrawing from the Yearn vault to then get into IBBTC, which is 90% the Yearn vault anyway. I mean, is there any way to sort of like have some kind of fee relief for people that are taking actions that keep them in Badger as opposed to like fully exiting? I don't even know if that's possible, but I mean, not punishing, especially with all this sort of, like I said before, all the composability coming, not throwing up too many barriers to moving around. That seems really important.
I mean, to a certain extent, IBBTC achieves that, right? Because the problem is there's so much in. So like, when I think about a scenario like, and we've got these convex strategies that we're working on, right? So like, we're going to end up releasing new strategies for our curve vaults, right? I can then see a situation where actually most of the curve vaults have a higher return than the Yearn vault, right? And so, yeah, like somebody that's just holding BYV WBTC could swap, right? They could put that in they mint for 1.1%, then they could redeem and pull out one of these curve vaults for 0.2%. They would have paid 0.3% to switch vaults, which is less. The issue is, as you pointed out, that right now 90% of what's in BYV WBT or what's in the IBBTC is the Yearn vault, right? And so like, if the returns are a lot higher, what you're going to see is that like everything else gets like cleared out of that vault, right? And the only thing left in there is the lowest paying thing. So I think there's but
Tritium, that's not a bad thing, right? Like again, call them what they are. The majority of the vault's returns are based in Badger rewards, right? And the Badger rewards scale based on the amount of capital in the system. So if the amount of capital goes from 100 million or 200 million to 50 million in a given vault, the APY will jump up dramatically, and it will solicit these types of kind of activities and just decision inflection points for users based on what they want or don't want to do. And I think that naturally happened. We saw a lot of the curve vault people leave to go to the interest-bearing, to the Yearn vault, and we may see something similar, with some of the increased APY that's going to come on those curve vaults as soon as next week.
Yeah, the thing is, like, that's not actually, like, at least right now, that's not the situation. So I'm looking at the website, and for example, the TBTC vault, right, has like 5.5% compounding and 2.5% Badger rewards. So like, actually, in almost all of the curve vaults, the compounding, the vault is paying more than the Badger is. Yeah. And the urine vault, not, I don't think, right? But everywhere else, that is the situation, which is better, right? Actually, also the urine vault is now paying more than the Badger is. So until you move to IBBTC at this point, we're actually getting more rewards out of the compounding than Badger. And what that means, yeah. And then kind of, I think in the long run, we need to think about like the overarching fees everywhere, right? But I think for now, this helps. And the question is like, does it help enough? I don't. Yeah,
I think the issue is we're thinking of IBBTC in a vacuum. The benefit, the true benefit to IBBTC is that it's composable and it's something that people can easily implement into their protocols. So not only are you getting the underlying interest, you're getting the interest that you would get from utilizing another protocol. So that's where IBBTC is better, and it doesn't require a better underlying yield or a better yield in and of itself. It will give you that additional yield by being a Lego in something else.
Right, but if we set up our fee structures such that the cheapest way to get out of an underperforming vault is to dump it into IBBTC and then pull something that's performing better back out, right? Then everybody that doesn't want IBBTC is going to do that, and in the end, IBBTC ends up being like a basket of whatever our worst performing vaults are. Right, because everybody else just swaps everything else out. And again, I think like we need to, that maybe comes a few weeks later, right? That's maybe then thinking about like the withdrawal fees all the way back to Bitcoin and how that all adds up. But if we are using IBBTC as like the way that people can switch vaults, we need to like somehow keep that well balanced, right? And maybe that means that the treasury needs to do it, right? Like maybe what the treasury needs to do is go take a bunch of IBBTC out of the vault, clear it all out, put it into something else, and then like whack it back in. Or somehow, I don't know, maybe like that's something that Badger can do like a little bit ourselves just to readjust things like when this stuff happens. I don't know. Does anybody have thoughts there?
Yeah, my general take on all that is, IBBTC should be the easy, lazy option, right? The urine vault, there's going to be new strategies on that all the time. So hopefully that'll be something that'll be somewhat lazy too, where you should be getting, at least close to the best yield, but then hopefully we'll have other things come in that, will provide really good yield. But likely if it provides really good yield, it'll attract a bunch of giant deposits that'll drive that yield down. So I don't think anything's going to be massively overperforming IBBTC. And then what Mitch said is, over a long period of time, like it might be for short periods of time, one better than the other, but ideally just sitting in IBBTC is at least close, and then you get added benefit from being able to use it other places. And hopefully that gets you over the hump to where you're not like FOMOing and being like, oh, well, this one has, the annual, we're not going to have, a 1,000% APY on Bitcoin for extended periods of time, in the app. Maybe, but I just don't, at scale. So hopefully that FOMO won't hit people too hard. Yeah, and I think what we're all kind of boiling down to here is how do we make, people that do want to kind of move things around or just make it not feel penalized if you do kind of get into one and want to get into the other. I think all that makes sense. But some of it might just take time too. And then also seeing that, things are going to change. Like, the regular curve vaults might go from dogs to being the lead horses or whatever. And I think maybe we can also. Okay. Yeah, but like, we can help communicate that and say like, we're going to do everything we can to try to get the best yields, and that'll result in, fluctuations in yields on current vaults. It'll result in new vaults coming in that'll have high APYs that might drop or low APYs that might go up, over time. But, if you want to ride the middle and then hopefully be able to go do some other stuff with it, IBBTC is a good option. But if you want to play the game of, chasing the top yield in each vault, like more than welcome to do that, but then there are going to be some fees. So it's just, how do we balance those kind of, if those people are useful as well, rebalancing everything, just so, balancing those two kind of approaches that people want to take.
Well, and I think to like Poe's point, right? Somehow we've moved like deep into talking about IBBTC. So I think like the concerns that people are expressing are about like fees. We were talking about how you could move between sets, right? And then the point was that we could use IBBTC, but then the point is that it's so off-weighted that like actually you really couldn't swap a huge amount of BYVB WBTC for something else anyway because it's not there. And then kind of going back to, because we're talking about fees, right? What SJG was talking about was, again, some sort of a performance-based withdrawal fee, so that in the situation where, like, let's be honest here, like at least right now, and maybe this will change, right? But there's this Yearn vault, it's underperforming. Part of the reason why it's underperforming is because the fees are higher. Part of the reason why the performance fees and AUM fees, part of the reason why those are higher is because we have to split them with Yearn, right? So insofar as we can figure out how to do the same things or better, and we don't have to share the fees with Yearn, then in the end, like, that's going to be better for our users. It's going to be better for us, right? There's less hands taking out like taxes. And then the question is, like, how do we make it so that, like, again, as these convex strategies come up, I really do think that for the next, I don't know, until we deal with the fees on the Yearn side, like our vaults that aren't Yearn will perform better, right? Because they're not suffering this 2% write down on the AUM fee. So until we do that, like, these are going to be our better vaults. And then maybe when we change that, like, the Yearn vault will be our better vault. And I think it is painful for like users that maybe don't have enough, particularly now, to get into IBBTC, or who don't want to do that, right? To kind of be in this situation where they're constantly like having to move around and pay high fees when what they want to do is stay in the protocol. I don't know what the answer is, but I think that we should focus on that. I mean, does anybody from the community, am I off here? Or what is everybody from the community? We're talking a lot and there's not a lot of input, but am I on point, or am I kind of just pushing something that nobody really cares about? Yeah. Okay.
I guess no one cares.
Yeah, maybe.
If they're not saying anything, I don't necessarily think it matters as much.
Yeah. Okay.
But this is what we got to figure out, right, Tritium? Like, I think it's a much bigger conversation. I'm not necessarily sure in the short term, a change to interest-bearing Bitcoin fees, regardless now or then, it's going to matter. It's going to matter because, 0.5 in, 0.5 out, no matter how you slice it, is going to deter people, especially when when you're looking at a swap. So if we look at changing it now or later, it's going to eventually change, especially if the narrative is always. If the narrative eventually gets to, like, to Mitch's point, you could, for the next 6 months, it's going to be based on where there's attractive yield that accepts interest-bearing Bitcoin. That's what's going to drive the majority of people to want to mint it and hold it and use it. Nothing to do with fees whatsoever. But when you get to the point where the conversation is, hey, should I hold WBTC or should I hold IBBTC? Then that's going to matter. Because if you have the same things you can do with IBBTC, but it generates 3, 4, 5% interest, a lot more people want to hold that. Now, how they get into that position, that's the stuff that I think will be affected by fees. And, using the baseline, because I continue to reference this, but, look at degenerates like myself are paying constant fees to swap on Sushi and Curve and Uniswap and all these types of places. You don't even think twice. It's literally not even a thought. Like, I don't give a shit how high the gas is. Like, boom, just you're hitting it. And that's the reality of our market and our industry right now. And the fees don't. As long as their fees are in that range, I don't think users are going to care that much. What users are going to care more about is, hey, are there places in Badger that are better than other places to earn interest on Bitcoin? And if the answer is no, then they're not going to be here. If the answer is yes, because we've gotten over a certain hurdle. The hurdle is, do users trust the Badger protocol? Has Badger shown their ability to actually, manage billions of dollars and do it in a security first way and build all that type of trust with the users? And the answer is yes. So users know, hey, I go to Badger and I'll feel comfortable versus going to this new farm that's paying 200%. We've gotten over that hurdle. But if Badger's 3% and a mediocrely new farm that has a little bit of trust is 25%, they're probably going to go there. So how do you just stay in the realm? And I think users care more about that versus some of the other stuff.
And to be devil's advocate a little bit here, on the one issue I see with, I guess, using SushiSwap as the baseline for comparing fees is that, as you said, all of us degens here swapping in and out of SushiSwap into different things. Generally, it's because you're trying to catch a high performing asset and you're kind of moving from one to the other. I'm going to sell my, USDC for shitcoin ABC or whatever. So you think it's going to go up? Where what we're talking about mostly
As
is
long
people
as you
going
didn't say sell dig, John. If you were about to say
No.
sell dig there, that would have been disappointing.
no buy dig. You're
I
gonna
did, but I just bought it back. I'm buying dig now. I was selling though, I have to admit.
yeah. Well, you want to be a buyer, so you get into the options drop for next month. You got to be a buyer.
I don't think I'm gonna get options next month, but I have some. So if it works,
You'll get options next month.
you don't. I sold all my dig and just bought it back.
That's good. No, you're good. You're in. Buy in now. But yeah, so but the difference between that is people are coming to Badger with their Bitcoin and trying to get into IBBTC. So they're not expecting to see from the asset they were in to the asset that they're getting great price appreciation. It's so when you're comparing the fee, it's more like comparing it to Curve, which is obviously a much lower fee. We're looking at SushiSwap because that's the actual other option that we have available right now. IBBTC isn't available on Curve. But yeah, I mean, it's actually thinking through it. The problem is that if all that we're looking at is, okay, IBBTC compared to just holding Bitcoin, and if we're looking at single digit, low, if it was only, let's say IBBTC, the worst case scenario like plays out where it's like 1% annual return, like most people would have been better off just like sitting in WBTC for the year then, because but it's that's the devil's advocate component. But I think what we're talking about here, at least the discussion and the framework is the important thing, and then also realizing that we're getting the underlying fees from the sets underneath it, making sure that's all aligned and accounting for the people that want to be like the lazy holders of IBBTC and users of it, but then also the people that want to bounce from set to set, maybe chasing a little yield as we see pops, and part of this is just getting reps. Like, we haven't rolled out that many new strategies or that many new vaults yet. We haven't changed the strategies on vaults yet. So as we're doing this, we'll kind of be able to see the behavior both of the yields and of the people to see what we can do to kind of make sure that we're accounting for both, because both of those profiles are valuable.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, Junta, to your point, like, so, I mean, 1% is better than nothing, right? 2% is better than nothing. But when there's a 0.5% withdrawal fee on the back of that, or even more if you're an IBBTC, right? When it's going to cost you, 0.6%, a bunch to get your Bitcoin back, then you've got to like take that out of what you're making in a year, right? And then there's like this opportunity cost of like, okay, so if I had this Bitcoin and another better opportunity came up, right? Like I could take it. And at least to me, I think like, 1 or 2% isn't worth the opportunity cost of having to pay 0.5% in order to do something else, at least not right now in DeFi when there's like stuff coming up and popping and changing all the time. And I get that the idea is that like the Yearn Vault is supposed to be doing that for me, but it's doing it too slow and taking too much money, right? So in the end, I'm still in a situation where other than being in that sushi pool, which pays well right now, right? But which I think for some big players, they can't really get into. Other than being in that sushi pool, like IBBTC isn't all that appealing at the moment, right? I think what Hash says, like once the compostability is all there, that's right. But to what SG is saying, right? Like if it's not returning better than Sexes, like if we're not beating BlockFi and Nexo and Celsius with IBBTC alone, then like something's kind of wrong, and we are kind of like then holding people hostage with fees in order to try to get them to use like our inferior product that's supposed to be better.
Yeah, well, the hostage component isn't. I think that's implies some intent versus like, hey, we're launching a product. It makes sense to have accidentally hostage. You wandered in here, but yeah, I think it is a good point about comparing it to the centralized options like BlockFi, Nexo, and Celsius, which I think they're offering like 0.5% or something like that for anything above, more than like 1 Bitcoin. We can see what that is, but I think looking at that and making sure that we're at least matching that or not, if not being over, and then the real bit being let's make it very composable to where you can easily take out a loan against it and go do some extra farming or things like that. I think that's something we're also looking into. If we can get it listed with decent parameters, is then we can have an IBBTC vault that like auto manages your IBBTC collateral, takes out loans and puts it into, some stable strategy earning 10-15% to get you an extra maybe 5% on top of your IBBTC or something like that.
So
I think there's things.
Hang on, I'm having a cool idea, right? Because like from what I've heard so far coming from the community, there was this idea of like flexible withdrawal fees based on performance, right? actually most of it's talk coming from SG, but I think this is interesting. Now we're talking about experience or a better performance than a sex, right? So is there some way that we can set, and again, like I know this is going to take a few months, so maybe you can think about this, but is there some way that we can set like a fee structure where like when the stuff is performing better than some benchmarks being like centralized exchanges, right, then the withdrawal fees can be higher, right? And when they are not performing, right, the withdrawal fees come down significantly lower so that people can, pull out. Like that actually kind of seems cool. Post says no need.
I think that work for fees. Yeah, I mean, I think that the performance fees will snag a lot of that. It is interesting to think about. Like, yeah, I mean, I would think about that more on like increasing. I think one thing we talked about before in one of the team chats was when we're launching new products, if we're really going to lean on the composability aspect, and I don't know how many other times this would actually even pop up, is having lower fees until we hit some milestones as far as like actually getting it listed as collateral certain places, and say once we can add that composability, then we can do that. And I guess to call out to the other people, one other thing I do want to call out the composabilities, it's not there yet with Badger Boost, but it's my intent, I think all of our intent, to make sure that we're kind of counting IBBTC usage where we can, wherever it's kind of used the most, and actually take that into account with Badger Boost and things like that. So I think, composability should lead to your ability to get kind of, better yields and there's more benefits beyond just being able to kind of borrow against it. Yeah, I mean, creating some sort of, it would be interesting. Maybe this could be a good hackathon thing if someone wants to create like an API that just lets us know what the current yields are on Bitcoin on centralized sources. I don't know if we'd be able to get where they can get that, or if someone just wants to maintain it or something like that. It would be an interesting metric, or it probably wouldn't be too hard to pull for us directly, and just kind of maintain a graph or a chart of just like a ranking, even like, people look at DeFi Pulse, but if we just rank yield at different amounts of Bitcoin for your deposits at Celsius, Nexo, BlockFi.
Yeah, cool.
Badger.
I'll put up a bounty in our honeypot for it this time and see what happens and go from there. So like SG,
just to do that.
Ollie, pop me, if anybody in this channel, like you can just DM me, but if you have any like other platforms that you'd like us to benchmark against, let's get a list, and then we'll try to figure out some way to like create a page or something where we can actually like benchmark our fees against everyone else. And yeah, that's a really good conversation to be having.
Yep. Yeah, because I mean they get those nice hidden fees, right? Like BlockFi, like I'm sure they take a nice hefty fee on any swaps you do through the platform that they don't actually tell you about. It's just in the slippage. So they got some like extra lock-in revenue there. Cool. Well, I think we're kind of coming up to the end here. Let me see if there's any, to keep the general format. We can touch on anything else that wasn't fee specific here. Aram, you said if there's other ways to bring other assets through the bridge. It's not the one that we have in Badger right now. It's an implementation of the Ren VM bridge. We have it configured just for Bitcoin right now. It does handle Doge and Zcash and Filecoin and a number of other different assets, and that's going to be expand going in the future. There is like a Ren native bridge. I think it's just like mainnet.ren.com, or I forget what it is, but a lot of people can point you to the link to it, where you can just use the Ren native bridge to get those assets bridged into Ren assets. I don't think on Badger we would necessarily host a bridge for other assets that we're not having in the platform, but there are options. Trudy, were there any other things that popped up in the chat that we didn't touch on? Or if anyone else wants to, we got a couple of minutes if anyone's touching any non-fee items.
Just real quick, so SG once again said graded withdrawal fees based on benchmarks is a great idea. Hashare pointed out that UMA has this optimistic oracle, and actually like if we wanted to do some sort of a system where fees were really based on that, we actually could use UMA, right? So we could have them every 2 weeks or whatever, like go do research on fees and then use that to programmatically determine them. That's what came up. But no, other than that, I don't think there's any other questions right now in chat.
Sweet. So I guess the general takeaways, yeah, Hasher, no problem. Thanks for hopping on, man. One of the takeaways, I think it's just we have our kind of general plan, we put it forth. I think Spada kind of went through the general proposal, and then I think we've just got a couple higher level ideas that we're going to keep iterating through, and we'll put up the bounty for figuring out some way to get more information on centralized BTC yield, which would be cool. Just more data. And then I think when we get these convex strategies out, I think monitoring what happens there is going to be the next big step. Just seeing how people behave with that, and then hopefully we'll continue to have more IBBTC utility coming that should help alleviate not alleviate but just make things a little happier for IBBTC holders.
Yeah, I just have one comment on that about what you're saying about the convex strategies and the curve pools or vaults rather. Yeah, I mean, as somebody who's in IBBTC, what I would love to see is people that are in those curve vaults whose yield is going to go up based on these convex strategies. If they aren't in IBBTC, which they generally aren't, or not, certainly not in the volume that the Yearn vault is, like IBBTC is not really going to be that exposed to that increased yield. Anything that can get the highest yielding vaults into IBBTC is good for IBBTC in general. And I think that relates to, I'm just wondering, why, well, let me ask you this question. Why do we think that IBBTC is 90% Yearn vault?
Because,
Yeah, good.
I mean, I think it's because of marketing and who was active, right? So we did a big marketing push and it was Badger, look at our great vaults. And then a bunch of people aped in and they aped around. But the people that are kind of left in the curve vaults right now, I think are people that put it there 6 months ago and they're not really thinking about it very much, right?
Yeah, that was kind of my assumption, and even my own experience is it's timing. It's just timing. But I think if there's any incentive or lack of disincentive for people in those curve vaults to get into IBBTC, they're going to gain all the composability options that are here and coming, and they're also going to, at least for right now, raise the yield of IBBTC for every IBBTC holder.
I wonder, would it make sense to have, I don't know how easy this would be to implement or whatever, or maybe we just do it manually, is remove, have zero minting fees for IBBTC for if you're using a vault where the yield is higher than IBBTC at the current time.
That my thought would be just as another approach in this, but the treasury could do it, right? So we've got all this Bitcoin, we could take all of the 200 Bitcoin in the treasury. We could put it into the convex vaults that are performing hottest, right? We could whack that into IBBTC and then pull out whatever is performing the lowest and move it back to Bitcoin, right? And then there are a bunch of fees that are being charged, but we're paying ourselves the fees. So I actually think that if the convex thing doesn't work, right, and if we aren't in a situation where our fee structure is allowing the market to take care of this, right, then we should just do it. And then that'll help bring up the return on IBBTC, and it'll give people then the ability to switch around by strategies a bit more.
It doesn't do the whole round trip, but with the proposal that'll be out there imminently for kind of creating a redemption pool for Badger denominated in Bitcoin, and we were thinking kind of to make that IBBTC would be that just have that structured so that it just uses whatever the highest yielding vault is when making those deposits. So taking any of the fee revenue, anything like that, depositing it into whatever is the highest yielding vault, and then put that into IBBTC, and then it holds the IBBTC. But it's it's tricky when it's what are people going to withdraw? And maybe we have to look at something else for people creating a Zap or something when people want to withdraw into just WBTC. So let's say you just want to take it back to your centralized wallet, or you just want to go into WBTC to do something else and not go through a vault, Zap it, but have it zap through the lowest yielding one for kind of passive rebalancing.
Yeah, we should do that. I think in the beginning, if we need to, we can do it with the treasury. So just to kind of wrap this up, I just want to, the Black Bear made a good point, which it's long. I don't want to read it out loud, but you should go read it, John, or anybody. Go look. And then, so, the original, this conversation came up in a discussion around lowering IBBTC fees for now as a stopgap measure while we discuss the rest of it. I think we've had a good conversation about the rest of it. I don't think that anybody has objected to the change that we're planning to make. But if there are any strong objections to the what we're planning to do this week, please like dump them in the chat, because right now I think what I'm getting is that this is generally something that we should do, and everybody thinks that it's at least a move in the right direction. Okay, and then that's it for me.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess we're at time. So as we wrap it up, like as always, if anyone has anything else they want to add, feel free to ping any of us. You know where to find us on Discord. Thanks everyone for hopping in. Thanks for chatting. Appreciate it. And keep an eye out for next time.